I'll call to order the Monday, May 9th, 2011 informational meeting. Welcome to all of you. There will be no report due to City Council Clerk and Chief of Council Operations, Deborah Owen. She is in attendance at an IIMC conference in Nashville. Councilor Brown, would you like to report to us on the Fiscal Committee meeting held May 2nd?
Yes, we had a very abbreviated Fiscal Committee meeting last week. We spent what limited amount of time we had on contract approval by the Council. I think that what we'll probably proceed with is one more attempt to find a meaningful compromise on this and then bring it forth to the full Council. Council, if those of you who were in attendance at last week's, or even if you weren't, if you have ideas or thoughts on where we need to be going, please send your comments to me so we can try to get that out of committee and move it forward. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Councilor Brown? If not, we'll move to City Council open discussion, and Councilor Entenmann.
Thank you, Councilor Egler. There's been a complaint filed with the City Attorney's Office and the Board of Ethics against myself concerning the Event Center, and I just have a statement here that I'd like to read. On Tuesday, May 3rd, 2011, Steve Hildebrand of the Build It Downtown Group filed a complaint with the City Attorney's Office and the Sioux Falls Board of Ethics. The opening paragraph of Steve's Hildebrand's complaint read as follows, and I quote, "This complaint is sent to the Board of Ethics as a complaint in regard to participation of city councilors in both discussion and vote on the event center location, and as a request for an opinion and a ruling as to whether a conflict of interest exists under Sioux Falls ordinances, which would require a council member to excuse himself or herself from participation in voting on the event center location and all matters related to the event center proposal. At issue is whether Councilman Jim Entenmann's ownership of land directly across the street from a proposed parking lot for a new facility at the arena site places him in conflict situation prohibited under provisions of Sioux Falls City Ordinances, Section 12.5-30. On April 14th, 2011, I received an email from Steve Hildebrand of the Build It Downtown organization telling me that I had plans to get a liquor license and open a bar at the property my brother and I own on Burnside. Steve Hildebrand said in his email that I had a conflict of interest and asked if I was going to recuse myself from event center discussion and votes. It was never our intention to develop the Burnside location into a restaurant or bar. On April 15th, the day after he sent me this email, I responded with the following email, and I quote, "Attached is a copy of a letter that I sent to Lori Hogstad in the City Attorney's Office. In 2008, my brother and I had an opportunity to build a restaurant at our dealership, and I might say it was the J&L Harley-Davidson location, our current location. We were unable to obtain a license, so we had our name put on the city list and entered into a lottery for a license. We paid our non-refundable deposit of $1,500, but did not win the drawing. We left our name on the list because we'd paid the money. I think we were around number 13 or 14 on the list. We were going to spend $1 million on this business venture. The opportunity no longer exists, so we no longer need the license." I continue in my response to him. I was raised in the Terrace Park, West Sioux area of Sioux Falls, and my family has owned commercial property on Burnside for over 38 years. J&L Harley-Davidson was located at 2101 West Burnside from 1994 until 2001, when we relocated to our current location. My brother and I still own the property, and it is leased to J&L Harley-Davidson and is used for storage. We also have a private office at this location. The property is not for sale, and I've said that numerous times to the press. I wonder if it is significant that Steve Hildebrand of the Build It Downtown organization filed this complaint with the City Attorney's Office the day following the mayor's recommendation that the event center be built at the Arena Convention Center location. Is it significant that Steve Hildebrandt of the Build It Downtown organization filed his complaint the day following my endorsement of the mayor's recommendation? I'm deeply disappointed that the discussion and the debate on an event center by Steve Hildebrandt of the Build It Downtown organization has now become an attack on the integrity of my family. My brothers Lonnie and Jeff, my wife Jill, my sons Jimmy and Joe, and my deceased parents Bev and John have worked hard for over 40 years to develop a family business. We have built our business through hard work and ethical business practices. I was born in Sioux Falls. Jill and I were married in Sioux Falls, and we have raised our kids here. Sioux Falls is my home, and I love this city. Over the years, my business success has allowed me to give back to my community in many ways, and I feel that my election to the City Council is the crown jewel of my community involvement. I take this responsibility very seriously. I will object when my integrity and the integrity of my family is challenged, and I will speak out. On May 6, 2011, I received notice and a copy of the complaint filed by Steve Hildebrandt of the Build It Downtown organization. On May 6, 2011, after reading the complaint, I sent a letter to the City Attorney's Office waiving confidentiality on the complaint. I believe that I do not have a conflict of interest, and I look forward to the opinion of the Board of Ethics. Thank you. And I would like to recognize that I do have my brother and my sons are here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anteman. Is there any other items for City Council open discussion? Councilor Jameson had requested some information from Public Works and the Finance Department regarding the $3.8 million, and I understand that you are prepared to come forward. Director Turback, would you like to come to the podium?
Good afternoon. Tracy Turback with the Finance Department. We did put together a brief PowerPoint presentation for you today. I apologize. We just finished that up literally a few minutes ago, and so I don't have copies for you, but we will certainly make those available to you if you'd like. Over the past few weeks, we've been working to prepare the update to the capital improvement plan for the city. And as you folks know, that process involves identifying and prioritizing capital requirements for all of our city departments. And of course, that will culminate later in June when the mayor presents his recommended capital improvement plan to the council for your consideration. However, I do understand, as Councilor Aguilar just mentioned, that there is some interest in adding to the 2011 budget that $3.8 million that was remaining as unobligated balance in the capital fund from 2010. And if that decision is made to utilize that $3.8 million in 2011, I felt compelled to identify some of the important projects that have come to essentially the top of the list in terms of projects as we've proceeded through our capital improvement meetings with the various departments. So you can roll those into your thoughts in terms of how we might best utilize that $3.8 million. So at this time, I'd like to share my recommendations with you on how that funding might be used. The arena has identified a number of capital improvements for that facility, and some of these have been postponed in recent years, understandably, because it hasn't really been clear what the long-term use of that facility might be, and it certainly made no sense to put an investment into a facility if at some point it would be torn down as part of a larger project for a new event center facility. And it seems clear now that with or without a new event center, that the arena will continue to be used in the future, and that arena building will remain in use. And so there are a couple of projects that have been identified that I would recommend that you consider for funding in utilizing that $3.8 million. The scoreboard certainly comes as no surprise, I'm sure, to you folks. That's been mentioned a number of times. The current scoreboard system is failing. I understand that we can't even get a maintenance or service contract for it anymore. It's so old. And it is costing a significant amount of money for maintenance costs each year just to keep it limping along. And I believe I've even been told that some of the replacement parts we've had to acquire from eBay or using eBay. So that's really become a challenge, and it's not hard to see why that would be a priority project that I think you should certainly consider for the arena. The second one I would recommend to you for consideration is the lighting system. Many of the components of the arena lighting system are original components from when the building was first built. That system, too, is beginning to fail, and the concern is that someday when they show up to turn the lights on, the system just will not work. And so that's again, easy to see, I think, why that system is an important priority that you should certainly consider at this time. The lighting system, just to give you a little bit more detail, the funds for this would replace a number of components, transformers, controllers, dimming systems, as well as the light fixtures themselves. So, in addition to the arena, the Public Works Department has identified several street improvement projects that could be put into action yet this year. The improvements to 41st Street, as you see, from Western Avenue to Minnesota Avenue, that would involve an asphalt overlay. The improvements on Minnesota Avenue from 22nd Street to I-229, that would involve Techcrete repairs. And Marion Road improvements would involve asphalt repairs. That would be from Madison to 60th Street. And those would total about $1.2 million. Some additional projects that are important, and I think you should certainly consider funding. I would urge you to do so. The parking lot at the fire department headquarters is in dire need of replacement. The department has been replacing it on a piecemeal basis as funding has been available, and the funds we're recommending here of about $100,000 would provide enough funding to finish the project that they've been working on in phases. Not a significant amount, but certainly a great need from the standpoint of it being in pretty severe disrepair at this point. We've identified a couple of improvements at in the library system. The parking lot at the Ronning branch is in terrible shape. I understand it's probably the worst city parking lot that we have at all of our facilities, and I haven't gone out to inspect it myself, so you'll have to take that as secondhand word. But the parking lot is in severe disrepair and in dire need of replacement. In addition, there's an improvement at the Cayley branch to the HVAC system that was planned to be done in 2011, along with an HVAC project at the Ronning branch. There wasn't enough funding in the 2011 budget to do both, so they've asked for some additional funding to finish out the heating and cooling system improvements at the Cayley branch. And that's my recommendation to you today, that you include that amount of money. So those two projects for the library would amount to, I believe, to about $240,000. In addition, the next facility that I would recommend funding for some improvements would be this building, the Carnegie Town Hall building. There have been some projects that have been recommended in the past that have been delayed for a number of reasons, funding certainly not the least among them. This project would involve some much-needed improvements to the building envelope, including the roof, the slate roof, some lintels above the windows. Those would be replaced, as well as tuck pointing the exterior of the building. So it would be a good step to improve the overall envelope of this facility as well, and continue to preserve it in its great shape that it's in. In addition, there's some improvements at City Hall, nothing very visible or flashy by any means. There are some HVAC improvements that will be needed to be done in the very near future. They have been, as I understand it, there was some consideration for a period of time of relocating City Hall, and so those improvements for some time were postponed or delayed. It's apparent now that City Hall will remain City Hall for the foreseeable future, so I believe it's appropriate to make the investments in the City Hall system there, systems to preserve that building as well. There have been improvements made to the heating system. The boilers were recently replaced with grant funds. And this project, as recommended, would be about $1.1 million. It would include replacing the chiller system for City Hall, which, by the way, is 1967 vintage equipment, so it's certainly served its useful purpose and has probably long since been at the end of its intended useful life. A companion project to the chiller replacement and the heating system improvements that were made would be a replacement of the air handling units at the building as well. That would, by replacing the air handling units, and I should also mention that would include conversion of the existing steam heat to a hot water heat that would be considerably more efficient and would maximize the benefit really of the chiller replacement and the heating system with new air handlers. And last but not least, I guess anytime I'm talking to you folks about the $3.8 million, it wouldn't be a complete presentation if I didn't mention the event center. As you know, I've been advocating utilizing that funding, or certainly part of that funding, for the event center, and I won't go over my past comments, but you certainly are well aware of my position that any cash component that we can put forward toward that project would be, I believe, a wise move on the city's part to lower the overall amount of borrowing that we will eventually have to do if we're going to proceed with that project. That's the extent of my recommendations, and I believe they provide a broad range of recommendations for priorities, and they do, in fact, touch quite a number of our city facilities and city departments, and include a good cross-section, I think, of the facilities that our community, that all of our community residents utilize. And I stand ready to prepare a supplemental appropriation ordinance for first reading at the next available council agenda. And we could certainly follow up with that with second reading and a resolution to amend the capital plan just as quickly as the scheduling allows. So with that, I will entertain any questions you might have, and Mark Cotter is also here if you have questions regarding the public works component.
Councilor
of this.
Urbanbach?
I should have done the math. I didn't. Tracy, what's that add up to? It's more than 3.8.
It uses it up.
Yeah, okay. So we get to pick, right? This is for us to pick and choose from if these are things that appeal to us, is what
If
you're
you
saying.
feel those are priorities, as I do, yeah, you'll fund them. There is the 3.8, or it's slightly less than 3.8 that's available, would be adequate to fund all of the things that I mentioned, with the exception of the event center.
Great, thanks.
Councilor Brown?
Tracy, first of all, I want to commend you and the other directors and the mayor for really giving the council some options. That has not always been the practice in the past when there have been issues in terms of deciding where to spend excess reserves. So I really appreciate you taking this seriously, this message from the council, and giving us true options to look at. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Antoman?
Tracy, will we get a copy of this presentation then?
We can certainly do that, yes.
If you just email it to me, it'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Any guidance you can provide would certainly be welcome. So,
Thank you very much. Anything else for council open discussion? I have just a couple items. First of all, Councilor Karski and I had the opportunity this afternoon to attend the tour of the Greenway project, and I would recommend to any of you the next time that it becomes available that you take the tour. It's quite impressive. And I'd like to end with our congratulations to Councillor Rolfing on the birth of his grandson.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to get the name in if I could. Gage Kenneth Rolfing, and everyone is doing fine. Thank you.
Great. Is there any other council open discussion? If not, we'll go on to our presentations, and we'll begin with Larry Toll, Washington Pavilion President, for a Washington Pavilion update. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Chair Aguilar, councilors. I am Larry Toll, president of the Washington Pavilion. We're a local 501c3 nonprofit organization whose only mission is to operate your building and everything that goes on inside it. Our board is made up of 15 members, all local people. Chuck Gullickson serves as our board chair. Richard Vandemark, who's here today, is the secretary-treasurer, and our newest board member, Nate Welch, is with us as well. Our purpose here today is really to give you a report on the financial situation at the pavilion, as well as some of the great things that are happening inside the building. When I worked in the New York City years ago, I saw a play on Broadway that was called The Wiz, and I remember one song in particular that captivated me, and it was the opening song of the second act, and I'll be following advice in that song today, which was titled, Don't Nobody Give Me No Bad News. Fortunately, I don't got no bad news for you. Since you have a variety of different agreements with organizations, I thought I'd take a little time to remind you what the agreement is you have with between the city and the pavilion management. All the financial support we get comes from the entertainment tax. Under our agreement, your only operational support is $114,000 a month, or about $1.37 million per year. Our organization pays for the operation and maintenance, the upkeep of the building. The major expenses in 2010 were $474,000 for utilities, $127,000 for general building security, and $423,000 for building maintenance, upkeep, and repair. By our estimates, if we add the other piece parts in there, we spent 1.27 of that 1.37 million on the building itself. We also collected and remitted $314,000 in sales, tourism, and entertainment tax. $108,000 of that comes right back to the city. It's the 2% sales tax and the 1% entertainment tax. So if you look at the amount we spend on the building, the amount of taxes we give back to you, it's basically a push operationally. There is no excess monies going there. Now, granted, you also give us money for OSEP and CIP that goes into improving the building, but from an operational standpoint, it's a push. In addition, using a nationally recognized estimator, we're proud to say that we provide over $15 million in economic impact in this community, which includes about $2.4 million in salaries and wages. Under the leadership of the Sioux Falls Arts Council, we're going, along with other arts organizations, we're doing an in-depth study that should be available in the spring of 2012 that will give the economic impact of arts in the community, and we look forward to that. Another thing that I learned after I was here last year, when we reported a loss at the pavilion, I came to realize that people think the city is the one responsible for covering that loss. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It's reflected on our books because the only operational money you give us is that $114,000 a month. I think if the city were to cover those losses, it would remove any incentives for us to be efficient and spend the money wisely. In fact, our current agreement, if we chose to, not be as good stewards of the building, but that's where we spend our money. We see it as a real asset to the pavilion and as well as the city. Let's look at the financials now at 2010. I think you've all got them. What I've shown here is the 2009 and the 2010 financials. And if you come up about 5 lines from the bottom in 2010, you'll see a net surplus, or actually a deficit in this case, from operating activities of a little over $117,000. Fortunately, we had a couple of really positive things that happened. The Dakota Academy for the Performing Arts, which for 10 years was a volunteer-run organization, wanted to be able to merge with us. We merged with them. They had some money, and so we had a one-time improvement of a little over $61,000. And I think, as all of you know, we started a fund drive last year to rename the hall to the Mary W. Somerville Hall, and the impacts from 2010 of that work was $396,000. So I'm very happy to report that we had a net increase in assets for 2010 of a little over $340,000. If you look, and the 117, the operating loss, is still a concern because we need to find an operating model that will generally produce revenues in excess of expenses year over year, so we have an ongoing surplus that we can look at. I thought it might be interesting for you to see, if you look down under 2009 actual, you'll see the accumulated operating losses of the pavilion since its inception, the $807,000. Now, if you put the increase of the 340, we now reduce that to $466,000. Still not great, but it's certainly going in the right direction, and we obviously are going to spend time working on that, and that's going to be a focus going forward. If you look at the upper right-hand corner, it says these are unaudited financials. The audit committee meets tomorrow. These are off the recommended audit by our auditing firm, and as soon as the board takes action on an audit, we will provide the city clerk with a copy of that complete audit. I really don't anticipate any revisions to this. Just as an aside, we save significant money by delaying our audit until the taxable entities have gone through all the firms in town, and we get, by delaying a little bit, get a much better rate. So before I leave that, are there any questions you'd like, or do you want me to continue?
Go ahead.
Let me share a little highlights from the pavilion from 2010. We started in search of Norman Rockwell last December, and through the course of the 3 months that was here, we saw 9,000 visitors in the Visual Arts Center. February was the highest month ever in the Visual Arts Center history. Membership at the end of the year was almost 2,800, which is a 10-year high. The Science Center, Kirby Science Discovery Center, saw attendees from every state with the exception of Delaware, almost 90,000 visitors. So as you can imagine, we'll have a great marketing plan in Delaware this year. Our Pavilion Performance Series subscriptions for the 6 shows were at an all-time high of 1,100. And I think the big thing we did is we expanded our mission-based activities. We have a program called Action Arts, and we've touched over 3,000 kids last year. We send art instructors into the Multicultural Center, the Volunteers of America, Bowdoin Youth Center, the Juvenile Detention, and the Y After School program. We do it weekly, and we do it for free. Through the performances of DAPA, we've reached over 4,000 people last year, mainly youth. And thanks to sponsorships from SDN Communication, First Premier Bank, and Schoenemann's Lumber, we open the Science Center every first Friday for free and had over 8,000 people take advantage of that opportunity last year. In the second year of our preschool, we had 44 youngsters that participated in our 3-section, and 9 of those are on scholarships thanks to people that stepped forward, so we have a good representation in that school. When the opportunity arises, we give tickets away. Some shows we know that we pay a flat fee for. We know that if the hall isn't going to be full, let's try to give some of those tickets away. So last year in September, we had 2 shows of Storytime Live. We gave a couple hundred tickets away there. And when we had Celtic Crossroads, we gave 100 tickets away there. And that's somewhere in the $40,000 to $50,000 range of value. When I was here last year and shared the information on how many volunteers and volunteer hours we have, it had a great interest to you. Today I'm happy to report that we saw both an increase in numbers as well as number of hours. Last year we had almost 300 volunteers that gave nearly 21,000 hours to help the pavilion. And pick any monetary value you'd like, and 21,000 hours is a significant amount. I have a number of those volunteers here with me today, and I'd like to kind of hold them up as the beacons they are for this community. You've obviously met Richard and Nate. They serve on the board as volunteers, but there's a few other people here that I'd like to recognize. George and Joan Olson are here. If you'd stand, please. They are ushers. They not only commit to volunteer for the 3 shows a month, but they offer volunteer extra time for things like Ag Day or Sidewalk Arts. They both assist with our 2-week-long musical theater camps. They assist students on technical projects, line memorization. They escort the kids around. They do the check-in, the check-out. They mentor the youth. They donated, since the start of time when they started in 2005, George has 1,100 hours and Joan has over 1,000. They, yes. Joan takes home the costume pieces and volunteers her seamstress skills to put together the costumes, and they are just really, really valuable assets to us. Thank you. We talked a little bit about DAPA and the merger. That was the volunteer-run organization, and the second person I'd like to hold out to you today is Sarah Crosby. Go ahead, Sarah, stand up. Come on. Sarah founded DAPA in 2001 and served as the artistic director until the merger this year. She was the driving force behind that merger and brought that into the pavilion and has remained heavily involved since it's been there. She has a unique background as a licensed social worker and a former professional actress, and has been invaluable in the creation and development of the Plays for Living program. The Plays for Living take actors, high school children usually, and they have a specific topic. It might be suicide, racism, drugs, a number of social issues, and they take those plays into the junior highs. Because of Sarah's unique skills, she helps facilitate conversations after that, and see children going to counselors after they've just heard something about suicide is a real rewarding, and it's a great way she opens up a lot of conversations. This year she facilitated 23 plays and has served as the chair of the DAPA at the Pavilion Committee. Easily given hundreds of hours of her time to us in making this happen. It's a great, great thing that she does for us. The other side of DAPA is chamber music. We have mainly stringed children that come in, and to be able to practice in the Belbus or play on the Somerville Hall stage is a great experience for them and a great way to build theirs. So, Sarah, thank you very much. Lastly, one of the things we've been trying to do is build new audiences. And when you look at a $474,000 utility bill, to be able to grow the number of people that come in, the more people we come in, the utility bill doesn't change much. So how do we develop new audiences? About a year ago, we were approached by Greg Johnson, who wanted to do a film festival. And we were talking to him about how to do that. And we got Julie Anderson-Friesen involved. Julie? And she became the programmer of our film festival. And we ended up, she's got experience going to national film festivals, and she brought that skill to us, looked at the films, brought them in. We had actors, directors, a variety of different people here, and it was a great success, and the filmmakers particularly loved the format. And then in January, we launched and that was, of course, called Real Dakota, REEL. we launched the Real Dakota film series, and we've done at least one film a month. We did the Oscar Shorts programs where we brought in all the live animated and documentaries that were nominated and had 240 people in the Belbus watching those. So Julie has, we wouldn't have this program without her. Like Sarah on the DAPA, we wouldn't have a film program, and because her efforts lead that. She's will be the programmer for the second one we do, and she's created a lot of people that have never been in the pavilion before. So thank you, Julie. So what else is happening this year? Well, we start our summer classes here in a few weeks. We have over 700 youth enrolled in our summer classes. 22 of those come with the United Way's Connecting Kids program. We open Andy Warhol in about a month. The Andy Warhol exhibit, that'll be here for 3 months, and we'll be actively advertising that on billboards along the interstate. We're currently seeking bids to upgrade the Cinedome technology to digital, and that will provide us access to much more content. Free First Fridays this year has already seen 4,000 participants in the first 5 months. We're working with the South Dakota African American History Museum Board to bring their exhibits to the pavilion. Our new series is on sale as of a week ago Saturday, and the initial response has been excellent. And as I said, we will have the second Real Dakota Film Festival coming up. Most importantly, we're going to keep George, Joan, Sarah, and Julie occupied with using their talents to be able to help us bring those new programs. Through the year, I think we'll have some more good news to share with you. We'll bring that later, but like I said, we don't got no bad news. Questions for me or for any of our volunteers?
Questions from the council? Well, if not, I have a question, Larry. From friends that attended last Friday night's annual arts night, I understand that it was again a great success. Would you share some of the highlights with the council?
I would, thank you. Annually, the Arts Night is the single largest fundraiser for the Visual Arts Center, and that only happens for a couple of reasons. The local and area and some national artists, 75 of them, submitted a piece, and they do it for free. They donate it to the pavilion. 2/3 of those, the really good news is they put a price on it. And in the auction Friday night, 2/3 of those pieces went at or above what the artist had put as a price. And in fact, one piece went for 4 times what the artist thought it was worth. She was very happy, although obviously didn't see the proceeds. We had, in addition to that, Paul Schiller a year ago came up with an idea that there should be a matching fund, dollar for every dollar that comes from a bid off the floor. And so we established last year a $40,000 fund to match the bids from the floor. We did that again this year, and that group, our sustainers, Arts Night sustainers, have been really, really critical in helping us do that. And lastly, Angie Haft, who chaired the committee that put on Arts Night, her and her committee did an excellent job, and it was really well received. Don't have the final numbers, but it will be well over $100,000.
Great. Any other questions for Larry? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Jill Franken on the EMS system design. Why does our EMS system look this way?
All right.
Jill.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jill Franken, Health Director for the City of Sioux Falls Health Department. The EMS week is the week of May 15th, and in conjunction with that, I made the recommendation that it would be a good idea to update the council, since some of you are a little bit newer in your roles, since we have the system design that we have today in place, and that's been since 2007 that it was most recently changed. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to share what are some of the policy issues related to our EMS design and system design that we have today. Over time, many factors have influenced the public policy decisions leading to our current system. Similar to other communities, Sioux Falls has unique factors that need to be considered in EMS system design. We are fortunate that many of the attributes of a real quality system design and a high-performing EMS system are the same components that we have in existence here in Sioux Falls. That hasn't been without a lot of hard work over the past years. So I want to walk you through why it looks the way it does, but keeping in mind some of that we feel really good about where our system is today. You're going to also hear a little bit from Julie Charbonneau, a QA coordinator for emergency services, regarding a nationwide study that we've participated in over the last few years. And we also have several others, including Nancy Wallstrom, who is here, who is the board chair for REMSA, who would be happy to answer questions that you may have. As well, Chief Hill is here, and he has a wealth of knowledge and history, has been through many of the different system design changes that have been in place or have occurred over the years. And then I saw Chief Barthel here as well, who would also have some historical understanding. And then Phyllis Heineman, who also serves on the board, the REMSA board, is here as well. So while certain aspects of what I'm going to share with you, and I'll try and be as brief as I can, however, I'll just be scratching the surface in the next little while. While I'll be referring in many respects to the ambulance service portion of our EMS system, it will also encompass the cross-section of the service that we have, whether it be when that first call is made to dispatch to when the patient arrives in the emergency department. So because all of those different components are sometimes in one way or other affected by your, thank you. Technology. Are affected by policy decisions. So let's get started here. These are the components that you have to really keep in mind when you're looking at EMS system design: the business oversight, medical oversight, organizational structure, financing strategy, and legal requirements. They'll be touched on throughout this presentation, but each of those must be regarded as you're looking at the decisions that are made. The public policy decisions that, when we break down those public policy decisions, there really are a group of components that you'll see right here, and I'm not going to name these because I'm going to go into each one of them in greater detail, but these are the things that are the sections or the segments, if you will, of the public policy decisions that need to be made or regarded. So let's get started with service area. As we look at the types of service area that you as a council would need to regard, it's whether the EMS design is monojurisdictional or multi-jurisdictional. And of those two types, you can see here some of the descriptors of those. Monojurisdictional, certainly, if you're looking at a municipality as one monojurisdictional unit versus maybe 2 or 3 municipalities or a city-county combination. Certainly easier design if it's monojurisdictional. There's no need to really cooperate with other governmental entities. There's, however, fewer economies of scale advantages. And then one of the things that you find when you look at other systems is if perhaps, for example, you're calling for a request for a unit and you're on the edge of one service area, well, it may actually be that in that other service area right next door to you, that unit could actually get to you closer than within your jurisdictional area. So that would be one of the things that's a negative about looking at monojurisdictional versus multi-jurisdictional, where you have greater economies of scale. You can pool your resources for infrastructure as well as allow for, but it is more complex. That's the one issue of multi-jurisdictional, and we see that all the time as we look at multi-jurisdictional cooperative agreements. Those can be certainly much more complex to manage. So, like we said, we work within a monojurisdictional service area. The next is market rights, and as we look at market rights, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of different ways throughout this presentation. But first off, you have to decide what are the segments of the market that need to be regarded. You have 911 emergency, making that 911 call. You have advanced life support. You have basic life support, and then you have what they consider in the industry to be 7-digit numbers for non-emergency calls. When you're calling for a transport that's not necessarily emergent, those would be considered in the industry those 4 segments of the market that need to be regarded. So in addition to this, then you have to decide what kind of agreement would you have to cover those market rates. And you could have no market rights in which the policymakers exercise no control over the service. There's no contracts in place. You're just allowing ambulance providers to do what they need to be doing without any government oversight. Open market franchise would be such things as requiring a license but not awarding any market rights. You're just simply requiring them to be licensed in your community. There would be limited franchise agreement, which would allow for competition for, say, the non-emergent aspects. You might contract for the emergent aspects, but then not contract and allow open market competition for the non-emergent section of that, of your what's done in your service area. And then there's exclusive franchise, and that is where all services are consolidated and awarded to a single provider. So we, in our community, have an exclusive franchise agreement that's in place right now. And just to review the pros, the positives as well as the not so positives of that. So the rights to all market segments are awarded to one provider, which can give you, again, economies of scale spread across the entire market. So you've got all of your segments being consolidated to one ambulance service, so they're able to enjoy those economies of scale. It's highly efficient. It allows for standards and accountabilities for all calls, so you can set the standard of what you want to be achieving for all those types of calls within those segments. And then it also provides market stability when performance security is required. So if you're asking for some performance security, you're asking of that one entity and can provide some stability within your community. Now, the flip side of that, it requires an award process, which can be time-consuming and does have a cost to the governmental, to us. It requires oversight. And it also does require the performance security for market stability. So on the flip side, then you do need to get assurance of performance security that's built into your franchise agreement. So again, we have an exclusive franchise. And that contract was approved by the City Council when that last came to be in 2007. So then you look at the next is production strategy. And that is the component. There are 2 different types of production strategies, if you will. And one is when you look at, one is specialized, and that is where you have one system for the 911 and one separate system for the non-emergency. So you're making decisions then to contract separately, and you're going to say to yourself, well, what's that? How's that different than the market segment? Well, you could actually have that existing within a single agreement that you have. You could have, like for example, this doesn't exist in our community, but rural metro could say, we're going to have ALS ambulances staffed and stocked for ALS service. And we're going to have BLS trucks and ambulances staffed and stocked for BLS, or basic life support. Very different, advanced life support versus basic life support. And then they respond accordingly based on how it is triaged out and dispatched to rural metro. And we don't have that in our community. I'll share that with you in a minute. But that would be one aspect of what you might be able to get from a production strategy that is specialized. So you can see for yourself the pros and cons of that. One of the things that it's in the past been very popular amongst paramedics at different times in different markets, because they go on less of the ALS calls, the advanced life support, which then allows them to be able to perhaps work longer hours and work 24-hour shifts rather than working the shorter shifts, because they have just, the workload is too much to really work, the longer shifts in some markets. But then the cons are listed here as well. And then what we have here in Sioux Falls is a flexible single system for emergency and non-emergency calls. And so you're able to enjoy that when you call 911 and you get a truck sent, it is an ambulance that has everything stocked the same. You have the same provider staff, standards. The inventory is the same in every truck for every call that is provided in the community. So again, flexible production strategy is what we have. Next is system revenues. And there's many different ways you can be able to generate revenues in a community. Every community is a little bit different in this regard. There are the ways you can obtain those, though, is certainly local tax revenues. Could be one method of obtaining revenue. User fees are another. Donations and subscriptions, and those are, I'm not going to take a lot of time to go into great detail on this slide, but would be happy to share more information with you on that. But what I can tell you is that we are user fee based. We allow in our franchise agreement with Rural Metro the ability to charge for that service, similar to any other healthcare entity that does business, and then they do the charging and send out the bills for that service, or do the claims out to third-party payers, and then they accept the revenue for that, and that covers the cost of their service. And so that is how we set up the franchise agreement to be provided for Rural Metro to be able to cover the cost of their services. So they give Medicare, Medicaid, third-party insurance, as well as self-pay, just like any other healthcare entity would. They don't receive a reimbursement for fee. They don't get a fee reimbursement from the city, so general fund revenues do not support the cost of that service based on the fees that they charge. The way they're able to, what was written into the franchise agreement in 2007 to allow for increases in the fees was that they were awarded the opportunity to raise annually their fees by 4% or the medical CPI, whichever was less. So, for example, this year they put in a request to the REMSA board to increase their fees 3.3%, which was the medical consumer price index. So, because it was less than 4 this year. So, okay, next is the business and legal structure. And this, again, comes back a little bit to how then the business structure is set up, and there are 4 common types here. The first would be more of a laissez-faire oversight, which is really no oversight, no guarantee of public access to the EMS system. The next would be developing a structure where it's an in-house operation. Typically in larger markets, you may see a fire service actually doing the EMS ambulance service. So in addition to what we enjoy, where fire is first responder while the ambulance is still arriving, they may, in some markets, larger markets, where it's less profitable for an ambulance service to be able to offer that in total, you may see ambulance service providing that. Then franchise, market allocation with government oversight, and then there's also out in the various communities, public utility model, where government ownership and oversight occurs with private operations. So we have a franchise agreement. Next is the type of competition. And there are, again, are you seeing a theme here of 4s that we're getting here? The 4 types of competition that are out there are, well, first would be if there's no competition, and that would be the case if you have an in-house operation. You wouldn't have the competition to award contracts to those that are trying to compete for that business. The next would be benchmarking, where you're comparing the entities that you're looking at against industry standards and national standards. Then there'd be competition within the market, where you might see retail competition where providers are allowed to market directly to patients. This is not recommended very much any longer because victims are not very skilled shoppers, and so that is not something that is recommended. And then competition for the market, or an RFP process. Now, back at the time the last agreement was put together, an RFP was considered, but it was recommended by an industry expert who had been brought in as a consultant to help hammer out the last franchise agreement, who really felt like going through that work of an RFP process was not going to get better quality or price at that time, and so that was not completed. So then next we have duration of market rates. How long would you issue those for? How long would that franchise agreement be in place? Open would be certainly what there's no specific term. Periodic would be, this is common, but sometimes considered in the industry unnecessary if quality and price of the services can't be matched. Triggered by an event. This would be such as if you have a contract failure of some kind or an inability of the provider to maintain fiscal viability. That might trigger having to close the duration of the market rates. And then there's also an option that's done quite often in the community, and that's an earned extension. So if they have a contract in place for a certain time frame and all the conditions are met, there's an extension built in to that existing agreement. And that is actually what we have currently in our franchise agreement. That agreement is in place from 2007 through 2012. And what was built into that is if within the first 3 years of that contract, if the services that were rendered were met all the contract requirements and the City of Sioux Falls was pleased with the business, then there could be a 1-year extension for each of those first 3 years. And that was indeed, those were met. There were no issues that were brought forward to rural Metro during those 3 years, the first 3 years. So that agreement is actually in effect until 2015. And so that's something for you to know as well. Next is contractor's consideration. And this is, so we grant the rights to the market, to an entity, and they need to promise us one of two things. And this you hear from me quite a bit is one of the sides of this coin. There is a level of effort, and I would very simply classify that as more outputs and looking at more, numbers of what you are looking for. So numbers of ambulances, numbers of staff, numbers of stations would be what you would get if you looked at a level of effort. Level of performance, on the other hand, is what you hear from me quite a bit, and that's looking at outcomes. What are the measurable outcomes that you're trying to achieve by what is the level of quality you want to see be enjoyed by your EMS system? And so you really would see more looking at response times. How are they meeting the standards that are set in the contract or in the agreement? And how sophisticated are they clinically in providing the service? And so, I'm certainly coming on board, not having written this agreement, but certainly a big fan of the fact that it's written to be measuring results and not effort. Next is performance security, and we'll go quickly through that. That is the ability to put into the franchise agreement a plan for the possibility of system failure. And then also the balance between security with the provider's ability to do business. So it's a balance. How much do you require them to be able to plan for something they would never want to see happen, and that is a system failure. And so we have right now a performance bond in place in the contract, which is $500,000. I believe, and then a 3-way equipment lease that's built into that for if such an occurrence were to take place. Then we get to medical oversight. And this is where you hear the work of what happens during our REMSA meetings, REMSA medical board meetings. And I will tell you that medical oversight is one of those things that it's like that phrase, you don't really, what bad looks like. You can't really, you can't always describe what's being done, but you sure know when it's not going well. And I would really attribute the medical oversight and the quality oversight that's happened and evolved over the years that is directly responsible, as well as what has happened that I want to share with you amongst those segments of our EMS system that have that we enjoy the quality of service that we have today. There are so many times people go to another community and they have to experience an ambulance ride or some sort of interface with an EMS system in so many other communities, and they come back and go, oh, we just love living in Sioux Falls. We really take for granted our system. So a couple of pieces that are really important to know is Metro Communications received, that do our dispatch, our call taking and dispatch, received a reaccreditation for another 3 years of accreditation back in 2009. They were the 45th center worldwide and the first in South Dakota to receive this recognition. That's really amazing. That is huge. What a credit to their leadership. Sioux Falls Fire Rescue, thanks to Chief Hill and to the leadership within his department, they are also accredited, and they are one of fewer than 150 accredited out of 32,000 fire services nationally. That's amazing, and that's really a tribute to them. Their most recent accreditation occurred in 2008 for another 5 years. Rural Metro Ambulance is the only accredited ambulance service in South Dakota, one of only a few regionally and one of 135 nationally. Rural Metro received a reaccreditation also in 2010. 3-year, I think that's another 3-year reaccreditation. So as you can see, that's such kudos to those as systems, but they're segments of the system, and then you need that quality oversight to assure that that the systems are talking to each other. The work that they're doing in the quality fashion actually is smooth and continuous, and the handoffs are done in a way that provides us the best care possible, and that's where the REMSA medical director and the REMSA medical board come in. Dr. Jeff Luther is the REMSA medical director, and Dr. Mary Helen Harris is the REMSA medical board chair, and they should be credited for that medical oversight along with their boards. So putting this all together, so you start with dispatch by Metro Communications. So you're having chest pain, and you make that call, and there's a dispatch. You have that interface and that conversation with Metro Communications. You may then, very often, they're going to tell you how to get your house ready. If there's someone there that can make sure the light's turned on, the door's unlocked, there's no stuff in the walkway coming up to your house and then they're talking you through if there's issues and things that whoever is with you needs to be taken into consideration should your condition take a turn while we're waiting for the first response. Then fire and police show up, and they are getting everything ready, and they're doing their BLS response and getting ready for the ambulance service to come and doing the critical factors and components that need to be done as well. Then you have the ambulance service based on that performance-based contract come. They get you loaded. Sometimes it's called a load and go or a hot load. I'm not sure what the lingo is these days, but back in the day, I used to know what all those were. And then you have that. You come to the ER, and then when Julie Charbonneau and Jeff Luther are looking at that call, they're looking at it from when that call was made. That's what they're looking at and assuring that all the handoffs were made, how artful were those handoffs, and what's that story that's told for that particular state, and what is the outcome that occurred. And oftentimes they're also talking and having quite a bit of conversation with the emergency department staff as well to know what happened or didn't happen that could have perhaps improved the level of care or service or outcome. So with that, I just quickly like to share with you who serves on the REMSA board. Nancy Wallstrom is the chair. Phyllis Heineman is the vice chair. I believe they're both here. Do you want to stand up, you two? Yes, please. Great, thank you. Tony Tiefenthaler, Clara Hart, and Chad Olson. I don't know if any of them were able to make it today. On the REMSA Medical Board, we have Dr. Mary Helen Harris as the chair, as I said. Dr. Garrett Taylor is the vice chair. Dr. Mark McSherry, Dr. Doug Geis, Dr. David Strand, Dr. Arliss Thompson, and Janet Kidamzali. I have to thank them for their service. They do this as volunteers. Sometimes these are long meetings, looking at protocols, looking at inventory lists, looking at changes to med lists and things like that that need to happen. And so we really owe them a debt of gratitude for the work that they do. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Julie Charbonneau. She just wants to quickly share with you some great data that we have regarding our cardiac outcomes.
Good afternoon. Sioux Falls participates in a national research study of cardiac arrest survival as one measure of comparing EMS systems to themselves and to others nationwide. This registry is called the Cardiac Arrest Registry to Enhance Survival, or shorthand is called CARES. This is sponsored by the CDC and Emory University, and just a little bit of history. Several years ago, USA Today, the newspaper, did a series of articles about cardiac arrest care throughout the country, and they found it was abysmal in most communities. They looked at the 50 most populous communities in the country and tried to get their cardiac arrest survival statistics so they could compare one community to another. Most of those communities either didn't know how to measure, didn't have the numbers, or wouldn't share the numbers. One of the communities that didn't look so good was Atlanta. And Atlanta, being home to the CDC and to Emory University, the mayor there was very concerned and asked those two entities for some help. Help us measure this. We need to do something. We need to know that all this work we expend in EMS is worthwhile. And so out of that came this CARES registry. The pilot program started in 2005 in Atlanta. In 2006, a few other communities were added. In 2007, it was open to broader range of communities, and that's when Sioux Falls joined. So we've been collecting our survival statistics and benchmarking since 2007. There we go. These are the most recent statistics available about cardiac arrest survival. And you can see the lighter blue is all the CARES sites. This is about 40 communities now nationwide that participate. And then the darker color there is the Sioux Falls statistics. And I've pulled out 4 here for you. Overall, cardiac arrest survival. So this is for cardiac arrests that were caused by a cardiac event. So this wouldn't be trauma or poisonings or other things, but things that were cardiac etiology. So overall, for all the CARES sites, they have about a 10% survival, meaning discharge alive from the hospital. In Sioux Falls, that's 26.6%. For cardiac arrests that were witnessed by bystanders, all the CARES sites, the average is 17.1% discharged alive from the hospital. In Sioux Falls, that's 33.3%. The next category is called Utstein, and that's a measure of the people with the highest likelihood of survival. So a witnessed arrest whose heart can be shocked back into a normal rhythm. And that's kind of the standard that we all compare. So all the CARES sites, 31.8%, which is very good. And in Sioux Falls, for 2010, 47.8% discharged alive from the hospital. And then the last category is unwitnessed arrests. Again, Sioux Falls is a little higher than the national CARES. The chance of survival from an unwitnessed arrest is not very good. Why is it so good in Sioux Falls? Because we have a very good chain of survival here. We have a good 911 system that takes the call in a timely manner, gives good CPR instructions. We have very active partners in the community who teach CPR. So we have about twice the likelihood of bystander CPR in this community than in other communities. We have good rapid deployment of defibrillators, rapid deployment of advanced life support, and good hospitals. Put it all together, and we have very good cardiac arrest outcomes. I'll turn it back to Jill for questions.
Thanks, Julie. Any questions?
Questions? Councilor Brown?
Jill, just a couple. First of all, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did I read or hear that Rural Metro was recently sold or changed hands? Is that correct?
Correct.
And what, if any, impact does that have on our situation?
Well, what we've been told is that it actually should be a very good thing for the community to have them actually leave the publicly held world and be bought by a private entity. When you think of emergency services and especially ambulance services, they never really felt like they quite fit in that world anyway, in a publicly traded world. Because depending on any given day that their revenues were a certain, for whatever reason, because of billing or Medicare changes in regulations and things of that nature, how they're obtaining their revenue and managing their expenses could, directly impact how they look in that publicly held way. So they're feeling very good that this is actually a positive. So we have not seen nor been heard of any changes that would occur, only positive and possibly, additional capital being infused into them as an entity nationally.
Okay. And then sometimes I hear from constituents who say, well, sure, I understand that this government has to be involved when it's an emergency, but if I need to transport grandma from one nursing home to the other, why can't I have a choice? But I believe that's because you don't make money on the emergencies. It's those transports that sort of cash flow the business. Is that correct?
In a community our size, that's exactly right, Counselor. That would be, you really need to, at this point, it was decided, especially with the last agreement, that given the community our size, they really need both to offset where the non-paying patient may come into play, that they're required to provide transport for. High quality, everyone gets the same quality of service. You really do need to be able to make sure you're offsetting that with all the other payer sources needed to be able to keep that ambulance system viable. Now, I know Chief Hill has some great information related to when you get to a certain size of community, it may make, at some point it may make sense for us to look at a different model. And certainly, there's always different ways you can look at service models, but at this point, that was the system we have in place was considered the best for us to have a good, viable ambulance service.
Okay. And then, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear you saying from a user perspective in Sioux Falls, our system is efficient in that, like a utility, it's user fee based, and the system really costs taxpayers nothing other than the oversight we provide.
Correct.
So it's a very, very affordable system for a city our size.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Rothling?
Yes, Jill. One thing, what would have happened if, or is there anything in, maybe I should put it this way, is there anything in our contract that stipulates that if someone other than a reputable company, let's say, bought out Rural Metro, that we would have had any clause in there to have put the bidding back out?
I'll answer the best I can for you, and then I can get you more information on that. And I don't know if our city attorney has anything to offer in that regard, but our contract is based on a performance contract. And so because they have to meet those performance requirements, if we would see that slip and those start moving off the path and start trending downward, then that's when we would start implementing. That would trigger.
That would trigger it.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Correct. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Councilor, do you have another question?
That's okay.
Councilor Urbanbaum?
I was just going to follow up on that, Rex. Then how long does it take for us to recognize the trigger?
Oh, Julie, I'm going to have you quickly talk about that. You mind coming up?
The contract as is in place right now has a provision for major breach. So if we were to see a major breach of the contract, like 2 months in a row response times weren't met, or experienced paramedic not on calls for 2 months in a row, or there's a list of them in the contract, we would serve notice that we had seen breach, the ambulance service would have to come up with a plan. If REMSA didn't find that plan acceptable, basically it would be triggered for a city takeover, is what the plan is. That's why there's that $500,000 performance bond, so the city could just take over operations. And besides the performance bond, there's the equipment lease. So not only would we have some cash to start up if the city had to do a takeover while we were doing another bid or whatever the follow-up plan might be, but we'd also have the ambulances and the defibrillators and all the equipment for an emergency takeover if need be. So it would happen rapidly.
Well, then follow up to that, and I know I'm supposed to know this, but I cannot make these letters work. What does REMSA stand for?
Well, it stands for Regional Emergency Medical Services Authority.
Okay, so what you're saying to me then is that REMSA, the Regional Emergency Medical Systems Authority, is watching those numbers pretty much all the time.
Yes.
You're looking at that every month, and Nancy's nodding at me,
Yes.
so you really are looking at those numbers all the time.
And actually, I look at calls and performance, and so does Dr. Luther, daily. But those measurements, things like response times and, checking to be sure that the right crew is on the right call, we do that daily. So
Great.
there's strict oversight.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for Jill or Julie? Kenny?
Okay, also during the presentation you stated that there's been a request for a price increase of 3.3%. Has that been approved yet, or is that still under consideration?
It goes into effect the end of this month.
So it's already been approved by the REMSA board then
Yes.
also?
Yeah, what REMSA has to do is certify that it's within line with the contractual provisions, and they did that at their last meeting.
Okay. Also, we run a mono system here right now.
Mono-jurisdictional, yes.
As our city grows and we start looking at other communities, our satellite communities like Brandon, Harrisburg, T, and they all start having their ambulance services, what type of planning are we doing to maybe look at a multi-type of situation, not only just for our city, but, this region, similar to what we're doing with our wastewater, with our landfill and things like that, working with some of these smaller communities?
Sure. Well, first, really appreciate that you have raised that question, on a couple of different occasions, and I think it's a real valid point. This is one of our first forays into that, because we feel an educated council is you'll have better information as we start going down that path. 2015 is not very far away, and so we need to start now in building what we need so that we all have the tools to make really good decisions about where we head next in 2015. I think I get word every time we talk about our services that just because we do it this way doesn't mean this is the only way. And so as our community continues to grow, we do need to take that into consideration and continue to evaluate what's the best, but that will take all of us working together to make that happen. So certainly, Councilor Anderson, that is definitely been well regarded.
Then speaking as of today,
Sure.
In the world of 9/11, massive attacks and things like, emergencies like this, being a mono system, if our ambulance system is overwhelmed due to an emergency at this time, what do we have in place to work with other ambulance services to assist them?
Well, I'm certain that Regan Smith could answer that far better than myself, but that is well outlined in our EMS plan and our disaster plans, and we have mutual aid agreements with the various ambulance services in a, I think, multi-county area to be able to respond to us, as well as us to be able to provide that mutual aid to respond to another locale as needed.
And then my last question. This would be probably for yourself and Chief Hill also.
Okay.
One of the things, I guess, when I poked my nose into REMSA a little bit last year, a discussion on the 10 leads. That the fire, is it 12 leads?
12 leads.
12 leads? Okay, I'm sorry. How has that conversion gone over as allowing the fire department to use the 12 leads now? And if you could explain the 12 leads too, Chief, it would be helpful.
12 lead EKGs are what we can be done in the field with the defibrillators that we have. so that when a patient arrives at the hospitals, doctors will have better information on how to treat the patient based on what occurred beforehand while they were in the field. And shortly after I received a letter from the 3 hospitals requesting that, we brought that to REMSA, the medical board, and they approved it. REMSA also approved it, and we have that in place.
How is that working out now? How much are you guys using it, or?
We use it on the calls when the protocol calls for it. So there's a standard protocol. So
thank you.
Councilor Karski?
Yeah, not really a question, but more of a comment and a little story, I guess. We had a ribbon cutting not that long ago for a funeral home, and one of the chamber board members talked about back in the 60s when he worked for a funeral home and how the hearse was actually used as an ambulance. I mean, this is back in the 60s, and the obvious conflict of interest that could occur from that type of a situation. So it's very comforting to see the work that you do, and I want to congratulate you on that and thank you for it.
Thank you. If I might add to that, I think that's a perfect example of how ambulance systems really haven't been in place for really a very long time. And so I think that's a testament to that.
Last thing, so yes. Also, I'd like to make a comment. I have been attending some REMSA meetings and interacting with the REMSA group here for about the last year and a half. And even though we may not have agreed on everything, I think that for an entity that is very unknown in the city, most people, if you say REMSA, will give you that curious look. You guys are doing a wonderful job, and I want to thank you.
Great. We'll sure pass that on to the rest of the folks.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Jill? Thank you, Jill and Julie and Nancy and Phyllis for attending, and Chief. Okay, our next item, Erica Beck, Community Development Manager, Tax Increment Finance District number 11.
Good afternoon, Erica Beck with the Community Development Department. I'll try to make my presentation brief to you. I just want to give you an update regarding a proposed tax increment finance district that will be coming to you for consideration on the May 16th council agenda. I'm not going to assume that everyone is familiar with tax increment financing, so I'll give you a very brief summary of what it is and how we've used it in Sioux Falls. Essentially, it's an incentive that can be used by local municipalities to assist in and with the development or redevelopment of property within your community. TIF districts capture property tax increases that occur due to development, and that increment that's captured is then utilized to reimburse developers for public eligible expenses, and those are typically defined by state statute. We also have a set of TIF guidelines in Sioux Falls that mimic and basically correspond with state statute, and that's how we determine what types of expenses are eligible to reimburse. We've used in Sioux Falls TIF fairly conservatively, and basically what we've used it for is to incentivize the development of blighted properties or properties that are very difficult to develop for one reason or another. And those have all been in the core of Sioux Falls. Not all within the downtown area, but within a very close proximity of the downtown area. We've had a total of 10 TIF districts in Sioux Falls. This would, if approved, be the 11th TIF district. I'll just give you a little bit of background or information on the actual project that we're going to be presenting to you on the 16th. But TIF 11 would be located in the Whittier Neighborhood Revitalization Area. It's just south of Terry Redlin Elementary School. The actual proposed project would include the construction of 52 market rate rental units in a total of 8 different structures. I'll bring site plans to show you as well on the 16th, but the site itself is very creative. I like what they've done in terms of proposing how the development's going to take place. The structures will be around the exterior of the site, and the interior will be maintained as far as playground equipment, open space, and areas to be used by the actual tenants that will be living there. What's important to note about TIF districts is that what we really look at, or what I look at in terms of how they're going to be used and how they're going to make an impact on the community, is that currently the property within the boundary, the proposed boundary of the TIF district, has a current valuation of around $295,000. Once the improvements are made, once the project is completed, we'll anticipate that value to increase to just over $4 million. So as you look at the impact that the project will actually have on the city, it's a good size impact. Not only just from the property tax valuation increase, but also based on the fact that we're placing market rate rental housing back into the core of our community, which is providing a good mix of housing types within the core. The developer can talk to you a little bit more about this on the 16th as well, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what they were actually requesting as far as the tax increment finance district. Out of that increase in property taxes, which is going from, again, $295,000 to just over $4 million, the developer is requesting a TIF in the amount of $475,000. So that's what they will get reimbursed out of that TIF district. And that will assist in costs that are associated with site preparation, so the clearing and the grading of the property, the reconstruction of public sidewalks and access areas, partial costs that are associated with the land acquisition, construction of storm drainage and drainage retention areas as well. One of the things that we do in our office when we are proposed a tax increment finance district is we meet with the Sioux Falls School District as well as the county. So in this instance, Minnehaha County. We have met with both of those entities just last week, actually, and neither group expressed any concerns to us. The Planning Commission also reviewed the item and approved it as recommended for approval, actually, to the City Council. I know that was a really short overview of this project and TIF in general, but I'd certainly be open to answering any questions that you have about tax increment financing, how we use it in Sioux Falls, or this project just in general.
Questions for Erica? Councilor Brown.
Erica, over the lunch hour, I was at Homeless Advisory Board, and there were some questions that came up about this that I wasn't able to answer. First of all, and I don't know if this one's one you can answer, what is market rate today for a one-bedroom and a two-bedroom?
I cannot answer that for you, but I could get that information for you.
And by the mere fact of applying for a TIF, it's a blighted area, and that was what was the concern that was discussed at the Homeless Advisory Board. In a blighted area, will people pay market value? And I don't know that it's not our business decision to make, but has that been discussed at all?
Well, I could tell you that, for one thing, blight is somewhat open to interpretation. According to state statute, and I won't try to give you word for word what that says, but according to state statute, blight can mean that there's just a lack of infrastructure. So it could be literally a cornfield and there was just a lack of infrastructure, and that can be determined as blight. In the past, when we've done TIF districts within the downtown area, oftentimes what we've considered blight is the fact that there's environmental contamination on the property. So after the project's completed, yes, there will still be some, I think, eagerness on the part of renters to want to live there. I think just because of the proximity to 10th Street and also the proximity to Terry Redland, that it's a really realistic site in terms of housing tenants in the future. And then I would also add that, and I think that the developer would tell you this too, I think he's going into this project knowing that there are some risks, but wanting to do what he believes is right in terms of trying to infuse additional housing within the core of the community. And so I don't think that he would go into the project if he really felt that there wasn't a market for housing in that area. So I know that he's done his homework and due diligence and understands that, yes, there's a risk, but he does believe that there is a market.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.
I guess I have a question quickly for Vernon on that, just to follow up on your question. Was it the determination of the homeless group that this was going to be low-income housing, or?
The discussion surrounded, it was with some of the providers in the community, and they were surprised that there were not any tax credit or low-income housing in the project, a project that large. And I couldn't answer at that point why that was or wasn't, but I, of course, assumed that they've done their research and determined that they can rent them. That was my answer to that.
And my interaction with the developer and in the neighborhood meetings, that they thought they could basically build a middle income on the edge of the downtown area and attract people who are interested in living close to downtown. And that's what they were looking at. As far as any neighborhood complaints or concerns, I think the one that I will definitely mention is the corner of Bevelt and A Street. There was a lot of concern about traffic going through there because Bevelt goes all the way through from 10th Street to 6th Street, and people were using that as a shortcut. And then going right there on A Street was the school also. So there was some concern about traffic in the development if there was a driveway that was leading out to A Street. And I think in the design, I think they already addressed that issue also.
Yeah, I can show you that a little bit better when I am able to show you a site plan for the development. But I think that they've addressed those concerns based on neighborhood input.
And I would say that it was two very good neighborhood meetings, and I think that from what I heard from the neighborhood at that time, that they were very impressed with the development, what was going to happen over there, and how it was going to mesh with the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Councilor Urbanbach.
I would just add to that we have looked at this property as we changed the zoning within the last few months, and so that's part of where those neighborhood meetings came from, and I've heard excitement as well, and it's really fun as a council person, again, still fairly new, to watch this process start from the beginning and now see it coming to fruition, so I'm excited to see it going. Thanks for presenting to us, Erica.
Any other questions for Erica? If not, thank you, Erica. We will have a public services meeting that will convene 10 minutes following adjournment. Councilor Anderson Jr., would you like to give us a little summary of what's before us?
Sure. At today's Public Services Committee meeting, we will look at the pawnbrokers and dealers in precious metals and gems ordinance. We'll also review the administrative appeals ordinance. And I believe there was one other thing we were going to look at. Okay, we must have moved that. Then we'll have our open discussion.
Thank you. Is there any other business to be brought before this body? If not, the meeting is adjourned.